Well, a who's who of the celebrity world has come together in Venice for tomorrow's wedding between Amazon founder Jeff Bezos.
Watching their dear, dear lifelong friends, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez, get married. Because
Jeff Bezos just tried to rent an entire city for his wedding. Not a mansion, not an island, an entire living, breathing city. But instead of applause, he was met with rage. Protesters lined the canals of Venice, banners flew from bell towers, and locals threatened to clog the waterways with inflatable crocodiles. While Bezos and his fiancée danced on a $500 million yacht, the people of Venice made one thing crystal clear. This wasn't a celebration. It was an invasion. And the chaos? It's only just beginning. They called it the American royal wedding. But if this was royalty, the people of Venice wanted no part of it. Unlike the warm fanfare that follows real monarchs, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez were greeted with closed bridges, protest chants, and a city on edge. Their wedding wasn't a dream come true. It was a disruption, loud, lavish, and deeply unwanted. It started with whispers that Venice, Italy, a UNESCO World Heritage Site with more than 1,500 years of history, was being rented for a private event. That entire sections of the city would be locked down. That residents would be restricted from their own neighborhoods. But the truth was even more surreal. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and one of the richest men on earth, was transforming Venice into his personal backdrop for a $50 million fantasy. Picture this: a masquerade ball in an ancient palace, a foam party on a $500 million yacht floating through the lagoon, rows of private water taxis whisking in celebrities while police sealed off canals to the public. And it didn't end there. The wedding would stretch across 3 full days, each event more secretive, more extravagant, and more exclusive than the last.
Celebrations are expected to last all weekend, and our correspondent Sarah Rainsford is in Venice for us.
But while A-listers received custom-style boards for what to wear, local Venetians received something very different: notices, restrictions, and barricades. Imagine living in one of the world's most visited cities, only to be told that for 3 days, you're no longer a priority. That Jeff Bezos' love story matters more than your daily life. The local backlash was immediate. People didn't see a glamorous wedding. They saw their home being treated like a movie set, like a billionaire's pop-up theme park. One where the ultra-rich could cosplay as royalty while real citizens were told to wait quietly on the sidelines. And let's be honest, Venice has been here before. The city has long struggled with over-tourism, gentrification, and foreign wealth swallowing up local businesses and housing. But this was different. This felt like a final straw. Like someone had looked at a centuries-old city and said, yeah, let's turn it into a party venue.
Lister after A-lister this morning: Oprah, the Jenners and Kardashians, Tom Brady, Usher, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jerry Seinfeld.
To the world, Jeff and Lauren were celebrating love. To Venice, they were trampling over dignity. And yet, despite the public outcry, the wedding rolled forward. With every yacht arrival, every helicopter overhead, and every street shut down for another velvet-roped reception, the anger only grew louder. The resentment only grew deeper. Because at its core, this wasn't about one couple getting married. It was about something bigger. It was about what happens when the wealthiest people on Earth start believing they can buy access to anything: cities, silence, and even respect. But the people of Venice had other plans. And just as Jeff and Lauren popped champagne, Venice was preparing to fight back. What happened next? No one on that guest list could have predicted. Venice isn't just a postcard city. It's a place where people live, work, raise families. And when news broke that Jeff Bezos had effectively bought it out for a weekend, the people didn't just grumble quietly. They took to the streets, the canals, and the
protesting about all sorts of things. They're worried about climate change. They're worried about the impact that massive businesses like Bezos' Amazon company have on
rooftops. Because if Bezos wanted Venice for a fantasy wedding, the locals were going to give him a reality check. The first shots fired weren't violent. They were creative. protesters unfurled a massive banner from a bell tower overlooking the lagoon, scrawled with Bezos' name and a giant red X slashed through it. It was bold, impossible to miss, and pointed directly at the Amazon founder's floating party palace. Below, activists marched through the narrow alleyways, shouting slogans like, "Venice is not for sale," and "No space for Bezos." Stickers and posters started appearing on bridges and public squares, calling for citywide protests every weekend leading up to the wedding. But this wasn't just noise. The organizers were tactical. One group, known as Extinction Rebellion, pledged to clog the canals with inflatable
mannequin of Bezos holding onto an Amazon box in the Grand Canal, people watching it float down the Grand Canal. Organizers even
crocodiles. Giant blow-up barriers meant to block Bezos' celebrity guests from reaching the venue by boat. Others proposed human chains of swimmers and even floating effigies of Jeff Bezos clinging to an Amazon box. Fists full of fake money. And they weren't bluffing. Protesters threatened to literally throw themselves into the canals if necessary. For them, this wasn't just about inconvenience. It was about defending their home from being transformed into a billionaire's playground. And it worked. The protests grew so loud, so unpredictable, that Bezos' team was forced to secretly change the wedding's location at the last minute. Security was tightened, plans were altered, and a celebration that was supposed to be seamless and luxurious suddenly turned chaotic and reactive. Even the presence of Ivanka Trump, protected by US Secret Service, didn't deter the outrage. In fact, it fueled it. Protesters accused the Italian government of bending over backward to accommodate foreign billionaires while ignoring the rights of their own citizens.
Actual residents' need pushed out of the center by businesses catering to tourists. So for some Venetians, this wedding is exactly the wrong.
The mayor of Venice may have praised the event as a diplomatic opportunity, but for residents, it felt like betrayal. In a matter of days, the wedding went from a fantasy to a flashpoint. What Jeff and Lauren had envisioned as a grand, untouchable affair was now the center of a cultural firestorm. And the protesters? They were just getting started. Because if Bezos thought Venice would roll out the red carpet for his love story, he clearly underestimated the power of a people who refused to be bought. And just as the protests reached their peak, the luxury of the wedding itself started drawing criticism from an entirely different angle. While protesters rallied in the streets and hung banners from bell towers, Jeff and Lauren were busy throwing the most extravagant wedding Venice had ever seen. And that's saying something. This wasn't a reception. It was a fantasy novel written by someone with an unlimited American Express.
Really something to see. Celebrity after celebrity heading to this Friday night wedding by boat. Venice is 9 hours ahead of us, so things are...
Masquerade balls in candlelit palazzos. Foam parties on the deck of a $500 million yacht. Guests arriving by private water taxi, gliding through the canals like characters in a designer perfume ad. And the guest list? Straight out of a Met Gala fever dream. Kim Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, Khloe, and Kylie, all there. Oprah Winfrey and her lifelong bestie Gayle King, who reportedly looked like she was being held hostage in heels again. Tom Brady made an appearance. So did Ivanka Trump and Orlando Bloom. It was the kind of bizarre social crossover you only see when someone with that much money decides to throw a themed event and doesn't believe in the word no. But here's where it gets stranger. Unlike traditional weddings where guests are told when and where to show up,
site that's reported to have the main event, the main black tie extravaganza. We've seen police boats circling the island. There's been reports of...
These VIPs received mood boards. Yep, Pinterest-style aesthetic guides to help them dress appropriately for each secret, undisclosed event. No addresses, no official locations. Just vague vibes like Mediterranean opulence and ethereal elegance. That's what happens when you're rich enough to prioritize the aesthetic over the logistics. Guests were told to meet at the docks for private water taxis, but only at certain times. No details, no public schedules. The goal? Complete secrecy. The result? Absolute chaos. And it didn't end there. Phones were banned. No one, not even Kim Kardashian, was allowed to snap a selfie or post to Instagram. That's right. One of the most documented families in the world went dark for 3 days. which in influencer terms is basically medieval torture. The whole thing started to feel less like a wedding and more like a social experiment.
All the hotels on the Grand Canal have been booked out by these guests, so Venice really sort of taken over by this Bezos billionaire wedding party. Not everyone is
How
happy.
far can you push privacy, excess, and exclusivity before your A-list guests start begging for a signal bar? But here's the kicker. For all this effort, every floating candle, every celebrity whisper, every themed outfit under the Venetian stars, this wasn't even a legal wedding. That's right. According to Italian officials, the ceremony wasn't legally binding, meaning all of this, the yachts, the gowns, the militarized security, it was all for show. A $50 million performance starring 2 billionaires and a cast of very confused, very well-dressed celebrities. And yet, the deeper you look, the more you realize this wedding wasn't just about love or luxury. It was about power. And what Jeff Bezos was really celebrating wasn't what everyone thought.
A massive party.
Yeah.
There you go.
Pictures are beautiful.
Right?
They look beautiful.
35 mil is probably just the caterer for the party.
35 million is a lot.
Because next we're diving into the moment that shocked even his biggest fans, the wedding invite, and what it revealed about how far Bezos is willing to go to reshape his legacy. For a man worth over $200 billion, you'd expect a wedding invitation that screams sophistication. Maybe something embossed in gold, a handcrafted Italian scroll. Literally anything that doesn't look like it was made in Microsoft Paint. But when Jeff and Lauren's wedding invite leaked online, people were stunned. Not by its extravagance, but by how shockingly basic it was. We're talking clip art level fonts, awkward spacing, and a butterfly graphic that looked like it was ripped from a 2004 PowerPoint slide. One commenter said it best. This looks like a middle school graduation flyer. And honestly, they weren't wrong. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite the low-effort design, the invitation included a very specific request. Please, no gifts. That's right. Jeff Bezos, the man who literally built Amazon, is telling people not to bring presents, which kind of makes sense. What do you buy the guy who has everything, including a private space program? Instead, guests were encouraged to make donations to select charities. And while that might sound generous, critics were quick to point out the irony. Disrupting a historic city with a multi-million-dollar wedding, then asking for donations to give back to the place you just disrupted. It's like throwing a wild house party, trashing the place, then handing the owner a gift card and saying, "Hope this helps." But perhaps the strangest part of all? This entire wedding, this chaotic, glitter-soaked, star-studded event, wasn't even legally binding. According to officials in Venice, Jeff and Lauren didn't sign any paperwork, no legal ceremony, no formal registration.
We actually don't think this was the wedding itself. We think the actual proper nuptials happened in the United States, but this is where they've had...
Which means this wasn't a marriage. It was more like a brand launch. And that's where the speculation starts. Some say the couple already tied the knot in secret back in the US. Others believe Bezos is stalling, careful not to officially blend finances without a rock-solid prenup. After all, when he divorced his first wife, she instantly became the richest woman in the world. Either way, what we witnessed wasn't your average wedding. It was an expensive illusion. A $50 million performance designed not to bind two people together, but to showcase power, control, and reinvention. Because Jeff Bezos doesn't just throw a wedding, he engineers an image. And what comes next reveals exactly how far he's willing to go to reshape the way the world sees him.
Make sure that you only invite the people who love you for you. You know, the people who were there before you built Amazon. You know, like Gayle.
On the surface, it looked like a celebration. But once you stripped away the guest list, the foam parties, and the designer tuxedos, it became painfully clear. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a message. One carefully crafted by a man obsessed with how the world sees him. Jeff Bezos didn't just want to get married, he wanted to rewrite the narrative. Let's rewind. In the late 90s, Bezos was a bookish tech founder with thinning hair and khakis pulled up way too high. Brilliant? Absolutely. But charming? Not exactly. Fast forward to today, and the transformation is staggering. Shredded physique, Custom suits, yacht tan, supermodel partner, and an entourage that rivals royalty. This wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was the final phase in a decade-long rebrand. From awkward nerd to ultra-masculine mogul, complete with a real-life Bond villain yacht and a camera-ready fiancé.
And I think there are only 200 guests. For people this wealthy and famous and powerful.
Yeah.
It's a small guest list.
But why now? Why Venice? Why $50 million? Because this was about power optics. Bezos didn't need a wedding. He needed a spectacle, a global headline, a legacy moment, something that cemented his image in the minds of the public as more than just the guy who made your Prime delivery show up in a day. He wants to be remembered as a titan, a tastemaker, a cultural force, not just rich, but respected, envied, untouchable. And what better way to do that than by renting one of the most romantic cities in the world and filling it with the most famous faces on Earth? Make no mistake, this wasn't about Lauren. This wasn't about family. This wasn't even about love. This was about power projection. It was a visual press release for the next chapter of Jeff Bezos' life.
Which is a real middle finger with the money splayed out Marie Antoinette moment.
Well, later I want to hear all about your Greece.
One where he's no longer the background billionaire. He's the main character. And he knows the power of perception. He understands that in the age of Instagram and headlines, sometimes a well-placed photo op is more powerful than any business deal. So instead of signing a marriage certificate, he signed off on a 3-day legacy ritual, calculated down to the last paparazzi angle. But here's the problem with legacy projects. They don't always go as planned. And as the protests grew louder, the guest list more controversial, and the public more outraged, Jeff's attempt at reinvention began to fracture under the weight of its own performance. Because while Jeff was chasing legacy, Venice was chasing him out. As the yacht parties continued and celebrities toasted under candlelit skies, something very different was happening just outside the velvet robe. The people of Venice weren't just angry anymore. They were mobilizing. And this time, it wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. Activists began organizing in force. They weren't just holding signs or chanting slogans. They were planning direct action.
Protesters that we've spoken to have talked about this idea of using cities like Venice as a theme park, as a backdrop.
Groups like No Space for Bezos and Extinction Rebellion mapped out how to clog the canals with boats, inflate giant crocodiles to block entrances, and surround the wedding venues in a full-on aquatic siege. One group even floated a life-size dummy of Jeff Bezos, gripping fake dollar bills down the Grand Canal, turning satire into protest art. And here's where things got real. The protests worked. Bezos' team, clearly rattled by the intensity, quietly shifted venues at the last minute. A high-profile wedding, weeks in the making, had to be rerouted because the people wouldn't back down. Security protocols were rewritten overnight. Secret Service agents from the US got involved due to Ivanka Trump's attendance, and local Italian forces were placed on high alert.
We went there, our team checked it out earlier, and we saw organizers setting up tents, we saw police boats circling the area. So again, we think
by Thursday evening, parts of Venice looked like they were preparing for a geopolitical summit, not a wedding. Police barricades blocked entire districts. Water traffic was restricted. Pedestrian movement was tightly monitored. Overtime pay was shelled out to officers, not by Bezos, but by the Italian government, adding fuel to the fire that taxpayers were footing the bill for a billionaire's party. It didn't help that protests were evolving from peaceful resistance into performance-driven disruptions. Local artists threatened to jump into canals. Organizers called for human walls to physically obstruct Bezos' guests. The city, already teetering under mass tourism and climate fragility, was now bracing for a class clash between the ultra-wealthy and the fed up. Even more absurd, guests had no clue where to go. Because of the secrecy and shifting logistics, some high-profile attendees were left scrambling, unsure where the next party even was.
I did not make the wedding party. Lauren's blended family did.
You know what I'm most excited about is
the only consistent transportation, Bezos' custom water taxis, yet another public display of control. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. A billionaire sealing off a historic city, protesters being silenced while celebrities sipped champagne, and a government that seemed more eager to accommodate wealth than listen to its own people. The protests weren't just about a wedding anymore. They were about everything that wedding represented. And for the first time, Bezos wasn't just being criticized in the press. He was being directly challenged in the streets. The question now wasn't whether the wedding would go on. It was, how much backlash would Bezos be willing to ignore just to make it happen? While Jeff and Lauren were clinking champagne glasses, the streets of Venice were anything but calm. The wedding wasn't just stirring headlines, it was stirring up chaos.
Not about exploiting Venice, but it is about putting a focus on a beautiful city, which of course, as you can see, is utterly stunning.
Think celebrity frenzy meets logistical nightmare. With 90 private jets scheduled to land and boat traffic at an all-time high, Venice started looking less like a romantic Italian city and more like a red carpet at the Oscars. Except with water taxis instead of limos. Locals couldn't believe it. Entire canals were blocked off, streets were flooded with security, and rumors flew that some stores were even asked to shut down for aesthetic reasons. Yes, really. But the best part? Even the guests didn't know where they were going. That's how secretive this thing was. People were getting vague messages like, meet at the dock at 6 p.m., bring your mask, leave your phone. It was giving Squid Game, but make it billionaire chic. And if you're wondering how celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Ivanka Trump handled that level of disorganization, imagine being in a foreign city with no clue where the next party is, and your glam team can't even post a selfie. For some of these stars, that's borderline traumatic. But let's be real. Jeff wanted this wedding to feel mysterious, untouchable, exclusive.
Amazing, because like I think might be a part of me that would be like, I want to see the spectacle. I wonder what it would be like to like have a front row or a back row seat.
No phones, no spoilers, no chaos leaking out. But ironically, all the effort to keep things under wraps just made it more chaotic. And of course, the more confusing it got, the more everyone wanted to know what was really happening behind those private palazzo doors. Venice became a spectacle, not just for the luxury, but for the circus. Between the secrecy, the mega yachts, the masked guests, and the massive shutdowns, it started to feel less like a wedding and more like a fashion show that lost its script halfway through. And just when everyone thought it couldn't get more extra, it did. So after all the masked balls, foam parties, secret docks, and glittering gowns, what was this really about? Was it a wedding? Or was it a billionaire fever dream disguised as a love story? Because let's face it, this wasn't your average ceremony.
They look beautiful.
35 mil is probably just a caterer for the party.
35 million is a lot. That's a big benefit for the city. All right.
Thanks, Mark.
This was a $50 million brand statement, a living, breathing Instagram fantasy. A production so over the top, even the guests didn't know where to stand, what to wear, or when to show up. The bride and groom may have said no gifts, but let's be honest, the real gift was the attention. And maybe that's the point. Maybe this wasn't about marriage at all. Maybe it was about creating a moment so dramatic, so outrageous, so unbelievably shiny that no one could look away. Not the press, not the protesters, not even the people watching from halfway around the world, wondering how you rent Venice like it's an Airbnb. Jeff and Lauren didn't just tie the knot, they hijacked the spotlight.
Because are anxious and excited about what's coming next, because again, the party is just starting, Hannah.
All right, Maggie, our thanks.
And in doing so, they turned a city into a stage, a guest list into a cast, and a wedding into a 3-act spectacle with foam, drama, and a whole lot of paparazzi. But here's the kicker. For all the money, all the mystery, all the guest stars and grand entrances, we still don't even know if they're actually married. So was this the wedding of the century? Or just the most expensive content drop in influencer history? One thing's for sure, Jeff Bezos didn't just trend, he took over. And Venice will be recovering from the glitter and the gossip for a long time.